My father texted me from less than 20 feet away and told me, "No one cares about your Navy career. Stay out of the pictures." He sent it while I was standing beside the gift table at my sister Blythe's perfect Chesapeake Bay wedding. After my name had been left off the seating chart, after a guest mistook me for catering, after my mother asked me to remove the only Navy pin on my blouse because it would ruin the photos. My name is Sloane Mercer, Lieutenant Commander, United States Navy, and for 37 years my family had trained me to disappear quietly. But 90 minutes after that text, a Vice Admiral walked onto my parents' lawn, nearly 300 service members stood at attention, and the secret my father hid in his tackle box destroyed the story he had built all afternoon. Chapter 1. The name missing from the tableau. Found out I had been erased from my sister's wedding before anyone in my family said a word to me. The seating chart stood at the edge of the lawn, framed in white roses and printed in gold script, so polished it looked almost engraved. 218 names were arranged by table beneath a linen canopy overlooking Chesapeake Bay. I read them once, then again, slower the second time, because after 15 years in the Navy I had learned not to trust panic when a simple mistake could explain something. Mercer relatives, Holloway relatives, my father's banker, my mother's charity friends, a county commissioner, a developer from Easton whose name I had heard my father practice over the phone the week before. Every bridesmaid, every groomsman, every cousin who had once sent a Christmas card and never called again. Not me. I had driven 4 hours and 15 minutes from my apartment near Naval Station, Norfolk, to St. Michael's, Maryland, wearing a navy blouse, gray slacks, low-shoe shoes, and carrying the same olive canvas bag I had taken through airports, base gates, and places my family would never ask about. I had not worn my uniform. That was intentional. This was Blythe's wedding day. I wanted to be her older sister, not a Navy officer taking up space in her photographs. I wanted to stand where sisters stood, smile when the photographer told us to, and leave the next morning before anyone had to make room for me. A man with a clipboard came up beside me and looked at my bag before he looked at my face. "Are you with catering?" I turned toward him. "I'm the bride's sister." His eyes dropped to the chart, then to his clipboard. He flipped a page, then another. His mouth made the shape people make when they are trying to be polite while discovering something embarrassing. "Let me get Diane." He hurried away toward the tent, and I stood there in the soft September wind, between a champagne tower and a lawn full of white chairs, understanding something I wished I did not understand. My family had not forgotten the flowers. They had not forgotten the calligraphed menus, the signature cocktails, the imported candles, or the banker my father wanted, seated close enough to the head table to feel important. They had forgotten me. My phone buzzed in my hand before I could decide whether to laugh or walk back to my car. "Keep your phone on this weekend, Lieutenant Commander." The message was from command. I typed back copy. I did not ask why. Not on an open line. Not while standing under roses at my little sister's wedding. After 15 years of service, from 2010 to 2025, I knew that when the Navy told you to keep your phone on, the reason was rarely casual. I slipped the phone into my pocket as my mother crossed the lawn toward me. Vivian Mercer had the kind of smile people trusted in charity photographs. She was 61, polished to the point of armor, dressed in pale champagne silk that made her look like she had been poured into the event, rather than invited to it. She hugged me lightly, careful not to wrinkle herself. "You made it," she said. "We weren't sure the Navy would let you go." "I requested leave 6 weeks ago," I said. "Of course." She glanced at my blouse, my shoes, my canvas bag. "Well, we are just glad you could be flexible." There it was, flexible. In our family, that word had never meant easygoing. It meant move where we put you, fix what we forgot, carry what we do not want to touch. Do not make a face when no chair has your name on it. I asked where I was supposed to stand for the ceremony. Her smile thinned for half a second, then returned. Seating got complicated. "Diane is working it out. You understand, don't you?" Before I could answer, Tessa Ward, the florist, hurried by carrying a box of ivory ribbon. She smiled at me and said the bridesmaid bouquets were in the bridal room, all 3 of them. All three Blythe had one sister. I looked back at my mother. Vivian touched her necklace. Derek thought the photos would be cleaner with an even shape. And you are always so busy. We did not want to put pressure on you. You understand, don't you? I had heard that sentence in more rooms than I could count. When Blythe needed help with rent. When my father needed me to come home and fix something with the house while he called it a quick visit. When my mother wanted me to pretend it did not hurt that every Christmas letter made my service sound like a phase. I did not argue. Not because I was afraid of my mother. I had heard men scream under fire and kept my hands steady. I stayed quiet because this was my sister's wedding, and after 15 years in the Navy, I had learned that not every battlefield deserved the first shot. But inside, that sentence landed where old bruises live. You understand, don't you? It meant I had been trained to make room for everyone else's comfort, while no one in my family had ever been asked to make room for mine. Blythe appeared at the terrace doors in a white satin robe, with bride embroidered across the back. She was 29, bright and glowing, her hair pinned halfway up, her cheeks flushed with the kind of happiness that made strangers smile at her. She saw me and ran over. "Sloane, you came." She hugged me hard, and for 1 second I believed the day might still find its way back to something gentle. Then she pulled away and pressed a stack of place cards into my hands. "Can you just check the gift table and make sure these match the seating list? You are so good at this stuff." I looked at her face. There was no cruelty there. That almost made it worse. Blythe had grown up believing I was the one who handled things behind the scenes, because I liked being useful, because I was steady, because I never cried in front of her when she was little and never asked her to notice when I was grown. Grant Holloway came up behind her, already dressed in his suit, tie not quite straight. He was 33, an insurance broker from Annapolis, kind in the careful way of someone who actually listened before speaking. He shook my hand with both of his. "Sloane, I'm glad you made it." Then he looked at the place cards, the bridesmaids gathered inside, and the empty space beside Blythe. "Aren't you supposed to be standing up there with her?" Blythe laughed too quickly and pulled him toward the terrace. "Later," she said, but Grant's question stayed behind after he left. It hung in the air like the first small crack in a wall my family had spent years painting over. My father came down the back steps as if the entire estate had been built to frame his entrance. Harlan Mercer, 64, owner of Mercer Land and Title, could turn a handshake into a contract and a family dinner into a performance review. He remembered names when they belonged to bankers, county officials, developers, and anyone who could help him move land from possibility to profit. The wedding was not just Blythe's day to him. It was a room full of leverage under white flowers. He saw me near the gift table and waved me over to Bill and Susan Carrington. Bill was from Bay Trust Bank. Susan sat on 2 charity boards with my mother. My father rested one hand between my shoulders, not quite touching me. "My oldest, Sloane," he said. "She does something administrative with the Navy." I smiled, because that was what daughters like me learned to do when fathers like mine rewrote them in public administrative. He did not mention lieutenant commander. He did not mention 15 years. He did not mention clearance, deployment, the calls that came at 2 in the morning, or the decisions I had made in rooms where no one had time to be proud. Maybe he did not know. Maybe he did not want to know. Both possibilities hurt in different ways. A few minutes later, I found the wedding program on a table near the entrance. Family of the bride was printed in soft gray ink. Blythe Mercer had 3 lines. College, wedding planning, charity work, beloved daughter. Harlan and Vivian Mercer were described as community leaders. Grant had his career listed. I had 1 line, Sloane Mercer, sister of the bride. Months earlier, Blythe had accidentally emailed me a draft that read, Lieutenant Commander. Sloane Mercer, U.S. Navy. That line was gone now, scraped clean as if it had embarrassed someone. My mother appeared beside me. We just didn't want the wedding to feel too military. Her fingers moved to the small unit pin on my blouse. It was the only thing on me that belonged to the part of my life they kept trying to make smaller. Her thumb brushed it like lint. "Could you take this off for the photos?" The pictures should feel timeless. I closed my fingers around the pin. For a second, I felt another hand, another place, Eli Navarro, tapping that same pin with a crooked smile and telling me to keep it straight. I did not let that memory show on my face. I removed the pin and slipped it into the inside pocket of my blouse. Not because I was ashamed of it, because I was not ready to turn Blythe's wedding into a war. By late afternoon, I was standing beside the gift table, matching cards, answering questions from guests who assumed I worked there, and watching my family move around me as if I were furniture they had paid for years ago and forgotten to dust. Then my phone buzzed again. My father stood less than 20 feet away, smiling at Bill Carrington, one hand around a glass of champagne. The text was from him. "No one cares about your Navy career. Stay out of the pictures." I read it once, then again. I did not cry. I locked the screen, lowered my hand, and placed my palm on the olive canvas bag at my feet. Inside it, tucked beneath a folded shirt, was a sealed blue box I had not been brave enough to open all the way. My father had just told me no one cared about the only career that had ever asked me to be more than useful. In less than 90 minutes, nearly 300 service members would stand on that same lawn because of it. Chapter 2. The blue box in the closetti picked up the canvas bag before anyone could ask me to carry something else. The house behind the tent was all polished wood and white flowers, every room smelling like lemon oil, hairspray, and money. I went up the back stairs because the front staircase had been reserved for photographs. Even in my parents' house, on my sister's wedding day, there were approved routes and invisible ones. I had always known which ones belonged to me. The room they had given me sat at the end of the upstairs hall. It used to be my mother's sewing room, back when she still pretended she had hobbies that did not involve committees. There were folding chairs stacked against one wall, garment bags hooked over the closet door, and the dry cotton smell of fabric that had not been touched in years. The larger guest rooms had gone to Blythe's bridesmaids and Grant's family. Mine had a narrow bed, a cracked vanity mirror, and a closet that stuck when I pulled it open. I set the olive bag on the bed and stood still for a moment, listening to the lawn below. Laughter rose through the floorboards. A microphone popped. Someone tested music. Down there, everything was moving towards ceremony. Up here, I could finally let my face fall. Inside the bag, wrapped in an old Navy PT shirt, was the blue box. I took it out and held it in both hands. It was not the medal itself, not the official one to be pinned and worn. I knew enough protocol for that. The official medal would only come from an officer with authority. In a ceremony, the Navy could document properly. This was a sealed presentation packet, sent ahead with a citation copy, a notice of coordination, and a small duplicate set I had not earned the courage to look at for more than a few seconds. I had opened it once in Norfolk, only once. I had read the first lines, seen my name printed in a way that felt too clean for what had happened, and closed it so fast my hands shook afterward. Because the paper did not smell like smoke. It did not carry the sound of rotor blades, broken comms, or a man trying to laugh when he was losing too much blood. It did not say what it had cost. It only said approved. There were things I could not tell my family. I could not tell them where we were in October of 2024. I could not tell them the objective, the route, the names of everyone in the room, or why the evacuation window closed faster than anyone expected. I could only say there was an ambush. I could only say the extraction route collapsed under fire. I could only say 2 people came out alive who should not have, and 1 man did not. His name was Eli Navarro. Since that night, I slept like the world might need me awake at any second. I woke when pipes clicked. I counted exits in restaurants. I hated being thanked, because thank you sounded too small for the fact that Eli's mother still had an empty chair somewhere. I put the box back inside the bag and pressed my palm over it. I was 22 when I commissioned through ROTC in 2010. My father had wanted law school. My mother wanted something she could explain in a Christmas letter without sounding uncomfortable. Blythe was the easy daughter, the photograph daughter. She smiled well, dressed well, told stories people wanted to hear, and made my parents look like they had built a beautiful family on purpose. I was the daughter people called when something broke. In 2022, when Blythe signed a vendor contract she had not read and nearly got dragged into a lawsuit over a wedding planning job that went sideways. I was home on leave for 6 days. I spent 2 of them calling a lawyer in Annapolis, reading clauses at my parents' kitchen table, and negotiating with a florist who had more leverage than Blythe understood. We got her out of it. My mother later told everyone she had handled it. Blythe never asked who really did. A knock came at the door before I could put the bag away. "Sloane, Diane needs you downstairs for a second." It was one of the bridesmaids. She did not wait for an answer. I slid the blue box back into the olive bag, pushed the bag into the closet behind the folding chairs, and went down. The reception tent had changed while I was upstairs. More guests had arrived. Harlan moved among them with a champagne glass in his hand, smiling like the whole county had been invited to admire his good taste. He had Bill Carrington angled toward the bay view, Claire Alden laughing beside a developer from Easton, and my mother floating between them like she was stitching every conversation into the family reputation. I stopped near the gift table, because that was where everyone seemed to expect me. Diane Whitaker appeared with a headset, a tablet, and panic hidden under professional lipstick. "Sloane, I'm so sorry. Table 9 is short on favors. The Alden's cards got swapped, and Owen Price misplaced the toast cards. Blythe said you're wonderful with details." Of course Blythe had. For the next few minutes, I became whatever the wedding needed. I found the missing cards under Owen's phone at the bar. I fixed the table favors. I answered 2 guests who assumed I knew where the tonic and extra bread baskets were. I did not run. I did not panic. I just solved one small problem after another, the way I had been trained to do long before the Navy ever gave it a name. That was the trick with being called capable. In my family, it sounded like praise, but it usually meant they could keep handing me work without asking what I was carrying already. Near the edge of the tent, I saw Grant watching me. He turned to Blythe. "Why is your sister working the reception?" Blythe glanced over, still glowing, still not understanding. "She likes being useful." Grant did not answer right away. His face shifted just enough for me to notice. Not judgment, exactly. Recognition. A few minutes later, while I was returning a box of place cards to Diane, I heard my father's voice behind the side of the tent. "Sloane never settled into anything we could build a family story around," Harlan said. "The Navy thing became her whole identity." Bill Carrington made a polite sound. My father continued. "Blythe understands legacy. She understands how to stay connected to a place." Before I could move away, Grant's voice cut in. "She served this country, Harlan. That is legacy." Silence tightened behind the canvas wall. Then my father said, cool and smooth, "You'll understand this family better once you're in it." I stepped back before they saw me. My hands were steady. That surprised me less than it should have. Then I saw her. Chief Alina Okoro stood at the far edge of the lawn in a dark suit, hands folded in front of her, posture so precise. She looked like she had brought a piece of the Navy with her and planted it in my parents' grass. I had last seen Alina on a stretcher with my field jacket under her head, her face gray, her hand locked around my sleeve like letting go would mean falling out of the world. Now she was standing upright in St. Michael's, Maryland, watching me hold a stack of place cards. She walked toward me. "Lieutenant Commander Mercer." Something in my spine answered before I did. My shoulders squared. My breath settled. My voice came out lower, cleaner. "Chief Okoro." Her eyes moved from the gift table to the wedding program, then to the empty place on my blouse where the unit pin had been. "You still letting them put you behind furniture?" "It's my sister's wedding. That doesn't mean it has to be your erasure." I looked past her toward my parents, toward Blythe, toward the bay shining like nothing ugly could happen beside it. "Did Command send you?" Command asked if I could be nearby. "Why?" Alina did not answer directly. "Did they reach you?" "They told me to keep my phone on," I replied. "Good. Reply fast if they send the next one." As if she had called it down from the sky, my phone buzzed. "Confirm present location by 1600. Remain available." I typed the estate address in St. Michael's and sent it immediately. Alina watched me do it. Then she said, There are people who needed to see you today. My stomach tightened. Alina! Not yet, she said softly. Just do not leave. I went back upstairs because I needed 1 minute where nobody called me flexible. In the sewing room, the closet door scraped open. I pulled the blue box out again and sat on the edge of the narrow bed. This time I opened it a little farther. The citation copy lay folded inside, formal and heavy, my name visible near the top. I did not read past the first paragraph. Instead, I reached into my blouse pocket and took out the unit pin. Eli had touched that pin the night before everything changed. He had tapped it with 2 fingers and grinned at me across bad coffee and worse lighting. Keep that straight, Mercer. It's the only thing on you that looks more serious than your face. The memory almost made me laugh, then it caught in my throat. From downstairs, my mother's voice rose through the hall. Sloane, we need you for family photos. I looked at the pin in my palm. I did not put it back on. Not yet. I slid it into my pocket, closed the blue box, and pushed it deep into the closet behind the folding chairs. At the time, I thought that box was the only thing hidden in that house. I was wrong. Chapter 3. The family Wu Yuo came for her. The first thing hidden from me was not in that closet. It was waiting outside on the lawn, dressed up as family tradition. By the time I came downstairs, Derek Voss had lined everyone up in front of the tall hedge that bordered the west side of the estate. The hedge was one of my mother's favorite features, clipped into a perfect green wall, so the bay would show over everyone's shoulders without the service driveway appearing in the background. Even the landscape had been trained to hide what my family did not want seen. Harlan stood beside Blythe with one hand at her back, the proud father in his element. Vivian adjusted the lace at Blythe's sleeve. Grant stood on the other side of her, his smile polite but strained. Rose Mercer, my grandmother, sat in a white chair at the front because at 86 she had earned the right to refuse anyone who told her where to stand. Derek glanced at his shot list. Sloane, can you tuck in behind Rose, just a little to the left? I stepped where he pointed. The hedge swallowed half my shoulder. Vivian leaned toward him and lowered her voice, but not enough. Keep the military guests out of the main family shots, please. This is still a wedding album. I felt the words pass through me before I could decide whether to react. Rose heard them too. She reached back, caught my wrist with surprising strength, and pulled me forward until I stood beside her chair instead of behind it. My granddaughter didn't cross oceans to be hidden by shrubbery. Derek froze behind the camera. Vivian's smile hardened. Harlan gave Rose the look he used when a county clerk delayed his paperwork. Mother, he said. Rose did not look at him. Take the picture, Derek. That was when the black SUV came up the drive. It did not belong to any of my father's business friends. I knew that before it stopped. The car was too plain, too purposeful, and the 3 people who stepped out of it looked as if they had dressed carefully for a place that had not made room for them. The man was in his early 60s, with silver at his temples and a dark suit that had been brushed and pressed but was not new. The woman beside him held a small clutch with both hands, knuckles pale. A young woman stood just behind them, 23 maybe, straight-backed and scared in a way she was trying to hide. The clipboard man intercepted them near the walkway. Are you with the bride or the groom? The older man looked past him, scanning the lawn. We're here for Sloane Mercer. My name cut through the music and the camera directions. I turned. The woman saw me first. Her eyes filled before she spoke. I'm Lucia Navarro. This is my husband, Mateo. Our daughter, Marisol. For a second, the whole wedding blurred around the edges. Navarro. I had not said that name inside my parents' house. I had not said it to Blythe. I had not said it to my mother, while she complained that my leave dates were inconvenient. Eli's name lived in a place inside me where sound did not reach easily. Harlan walked toward them before I could move. I'm sorry, he said with his polished host voice. Were you invited through the bride's side or the groom's side? They're with me, I said. He looked at me as if I had broken a rule by having people of my own. Lucia stepped closer. We don't want to intrude. Command said Lieutenant Commander Mercer would be here, and we wanted to thank her in person. We heard she was here today. Harlan's face did not change, but I knew him well enough to see the calculation begin. Grief at his perfect wedding. Unknown guests, in front of Bill Carrington and Claire Alden. A story he could not control. I moved before he could speak. "Come with me," I said. "Let's get you out of the sun." I led them to a shaded table near the side of the tent and brought water myself. Mateo thanked me with a nod that looked like it cost him something. Marisol held her cup without drinking. Lucia kept looking at my face like she was searching for the last reflection of her son. Harlan caught my elbow on the side porch. "This is Blythe's wedding, Sloane. Not a memorial service. They lost their son. I understand that." "No, Dad, you don't." His jaw tightened, and I am sorry for them, but grief has a way of taking over a room. There it was, not cruelty with teeth. Cruelty in a suit. Cruelty worried about lighting, seating, and who might ask uncomfortable questions over dinner. When I came back to the tent, I saw Diane with a revised seating chart on her tablet. Table 14 had been moved near the service station, beside the generator screen. Navarro, 3 guests had been typed in at the bottom. I looked at Diane. "Who told you to put them there?" She hesitated. "Vivian said it would be quieter. That family will not sit beside a generator so my father can pretend grief is bad decor." "Sloane, every table is already set." "Then unset one." I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. Diane looked at me. Then at the rank she did not know but somehow heard in my tone. She moved them to a table with a clear view of the lawn. Lucia asked if she could speak with me for a moment near the hydrangeas. "I'm not asking you to break any rules," she said. "I know there are things you can't tell us. I just need to know if Eli knew someone was there." The question hit harder than anything my father had said. I looked at her hands. They were shaking. "He was not alone," I said. "He heard his name. He knew someone was with him." Lucia closed her eyes. Mateo turned away slightly. Marisol covered her mouth with her fingers. I wanted to give them more. I wanted to give them the whole night back in a way that would make sense. But classified things do not become less classified, because a mother deserves mercy. Marisol looked at me through tears she refused to let fall. "You were the last person who knew my brother as alive, not as a casualty." I had no answer for that. There are sentences that do not ask for one. Rose found me a few minutes later near the terrace doors. "Did you receive a letter from the Navy here?" My body went still. "What letter?" "About 10 days ago. Department of the Navy. Your name on the envelope. I saw it on the hall table. I never got it." Rose's eyes went sharp. "Your father took it into his study. Later he said it was nothing important. I found Vivian near the programs, straightening stacks no one had disturbed." "Was there a Navy letter for me?" Her hand paused. "I'm sure anything important would have reached you through proper channels." "That is not what I asked." "It was probably paperwork." I looked at her long enough for her to look away. Before I could push harder, Blythe rushed over, veil lifted in one hand. "Sloane, the Unity candle lighter is missing, and the officiant wants to know if we changed the order." "I really need you right now." The old part of me almost moved. The part that fixed every crisis before anyone else had to feel it. Then I looked at Lucia Navarro sitting upright at her table, at Alina watching from the edge of the lawn, at Rose already turning toward the house with purpose in her eyes. "You have a coordinator," I said. "I have guests." Blythe blinked as if I had answered in another language. Grant stood just behind her. He heard me. This time, he did not look confused. He looked like he finally believed what he had been seeing all afternoon. Rose disappeared through the side door. 10 minutes later, she came back from the garage carrying an envelope between 2 fingers like it was evidence. She placed it in my hand. The seal read Department of the Navy. The envelope had been opened. Folded hard. The edge was torn. My name was printed across the front, Elkander Sloane Mercer. Rose's voice was low and furious. "Your father didn't forget to give this to you. He hid it." I opened the letter. The first line confirmed approval for Navy Crossfield presentation coordination. Not the formal ceremony. That would still happen later in Norfolk. This was something authorized separately, something being moved because the Navarro family needed to witness it before Eli's anniversary came around. My phone buzzed in my palm. Presentation team on site. Senior officer inbound. Out on the lawn, music rose. Guests laughed. Somewhere beneath the tent, my father lifted his glass as if he still controlled the story. I stood there with the opened letter in my hand and understood that he had known. He had known before he told me no one cared. Chapter 4. The Letter. He hit the hallway narrowed around me as I left the sound of the lawn behind. I had carried heavier things than that opened envelope. I had carried radio gear through rain, a wounded man's weight across broken ground, and silence through rooms where no one knew what not to ask. But that letter shook in my hand because it had my father's fingerprints on it. Not literally, maybe. Maybe the paper would not prove anything in a way a court would care about. But I knew the fold of it. I knew the torn edge. I knew the smell of his garage on the envelope. Rose walked beside me, slower than she wanted to. One hand on the wall and the other gripping her cane. "That wasn't just cruel," she said. "Harlan may have crossed a legal line. He opened federal mail with your name on it." I looked down at the Department of the Navy SEAL. He'll say it came to his house. And I'll say he knew how to use a phone. That almost made me smile. Almost. We found Vivian in the small sitting room off the foyer, rearranging a vase that did not need rearranging. Her hands moved too carefully. She had always believed if she could keep flowers straight and voices low, nothing ugly had to count as real. I held out the envelope. She went pale before she could stop herself. "Your father thought it would be better after the wedding," she said. "Better for who?" "Sloane Blythe has waited for this day her whole life. Your father has important people here. Bill Carrington, Claire Alden, half the county is watching. Not everything has to become about the Navy. It became about the Navy when you opened my mail and erased my rank from the program." Her mouth tightened, but she did not deny it. "We did not erase you. You left one line, sister of the bride." The pictures did not need uniforms, medals, grief. They needed to feel timeless. I stared at her, and for the first time that day, I let her see that I was not confused by the softness of her voice. "You don't want timeless. You want clean. There's a difference." The door opened before she could answer. Harlan stood there with his champagne glass still in his hand, as if he had brought the reception into the room with him. His eyes went from my face to the envelope, then to my grandmother. "Mother, this is not the time." Rose lifted her chin. "You lost the right to decide that when you hid her letter in a tackle box." His jaw hardened. I held up the paper. "They did tell me, Dad. The Navy should have had the courtesy to coordinate properly." "They did. You hid it." He set the glass down with a controlled click. "I protected this family from a spectacle." I laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because the sentence was so perfectly him. "A spectacle." "Yes," he said. "A military presentation at your sister's wedding. Do you hear yourself? You will have your formal ceremony later at the base. Today belongs to Blythe." Then, "Why did you read it?" He looked away for half a second. That was answer enough. Grant appeared in the doorway behind him, tie still slightly crooked, face no longer polite. "You hid a Navy letter from your daughter." Harlan turned sharply. "This is family business." Grant did not move. "I'm marrying into this family in an hour. I'd like to know what kind." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Blythe came down the hall, her veil gathered in one hand. "What is happening?" Vivian stepped toward her. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just timing." Blythe looked at me. Sloane. I could have told her everything right there. I could have handed her the opened envelope and the program with my rank removed and the text from our father. I could have made her wedding day split open before the ceremony even started. But Blythe was standing there in white, still half inside the world our parents had built for her, and I knew the truth would find her soon enough. "Ask them after the ceremony," I said, her face changed, not understanding yet, but afraid to. My phone buzzed again. "Remain available. Do not depart location." A second later, Alina stepped into the hallway from the side entrance, calm as if the house belonged to her more than it belonged to us. She looked at me. "You need to know what's coming." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "Who is this?" "Chief Alina Okoro," she said. "United States Navy." He did not like the way she said it. Not loud, not rude, just immovable. Alina turned back to me. "The field presentation has been authorized." The formal ceremony in Norfolk still happens later with full protocol. This is separate. Command approved it because the Navarro family asked to witness it before Eli's anniversary. My throat tightened at his name. They're already nearby, she continued. Staged near a church parking lot off the main road. Command coordinated with the venue contact and local security before anyone came through that gate. They were not going to enter until your location was confirmed and the Navarro family was seated. How many? Nearly 300 service members. Not all SEALs. SEALs, corpsmen, sailors, support personnel from 3 commands. People who knew Eli, people who know what you did, people who are alive because of decisions made that night. Harlan made a sound under his breath. Absolutely not. I looked at Alina. Can we move it somewhere else? Her eyes softened, but she did not let me hide inside the question. Sloane, the formal ceremony is still yours. This moment is for the Navarro family too. So ask yourself honestly, are you protecting Blythe right now, or are you protecting the version of you your father taught you to be? I did not answer, because the truth had already moved in my chest. Outside, the first dark vehicles appeared beyond the gate. Harlan saw them through the window, and his face changed in a way I had never seen before. Not guilt, not regret, loss of control. He pushed past us and went toward the lawn, already signaling for Diane. I followed at a distance. He spoke fast, low, furious. Tell them this is private property. Tell them this is a wedding. They need to leave. Diane looked from him to the driveway and did not move. Bill Carrington had stopped mid-conversation. Susan Carrington turned toward the gate. Claire Alden stood with one hand on her champagne flute, watching the entire scene like a decision she would remember later. My phone buzzed again. It was from Harlan. No one cares about your Navy career. Stay out of the pictures and keep those people quiet. I looked up from the screen. Lucia Navarro sat at her table with Mateo beside her and Marisol's hand in hers. They had a clear view now. They were not beside the generator. They were not hidden by the service station. For the first time that day, someone who needed to be seen had not been moved out of the frame. If I stepped behind the hedge again, it would not just be me disappearing. It would be Eli. It would be his family. It would be the night no one in my house had ever cared to understand. I turned and went back upstairs. In the sewing room, I pulled open the closet and moved the folding chairs aside. The blue box was where I had left it. This time I opened it all the way. The citation copy unfolded under my hands. The words were formal, controlled, almost beautiful. Extraordinary heroism. Complete disregard for personal safety. Returned under fire. Refused evacuation until all recoverable personnel were accounted for. I hated how clean it sounded. I hated that Eli would never hear it. I closed my eyes, then reached into my blouse pocket and took out the unit pin. My hands were steady when I placed it back on the fabric and fastened it where it belonged. In the cracked vanity mirror, I did not see the woman at the gift table. I did not see the administrative daughter. I did not see the sister tucked behind a hedge. I saw Lieutenant Commander Sloane Mercer. A soft knock came at the door. "Sloane," Grant said from the hall. He did not come in. "Whatever this is, I think Blythe needs to see the truth, but not because your father allows it." I opened the door. "Thank you." He nodded once. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Most people don't." I went downstairs with the envelope in one hand and the blue box back in my bag. Harlan stood near the hedge, still trying to pull the wedding back into shape. "Stand with the family," he said under his breath, "and do not embarrass me." I looked at him. I'm not the one who opened someone else's mail. The first tires rolled over the gravel drive, then the second car came in. Then the third. Dress uniforms stepped out into the late afternoon light, quiet and deliberate, forming lines along the edge of the lawn. The band slowed, then stopped. One by one, the wedding guests turned toward the drive. Harlan walked forward, face rigid. "This is a private wedding." A senior enlisted man looked at him, then past him, directly at me. Alina came to my side. "Don't step behind the hedge this time." The last black sedan stopped at the end of the drive. The rear door opened. Chapter 5. The Lowan stood up. Vice Admiral Thomas Keene stepped out into the late afternoon light, and the lawn changed without anyone raising a voice. He was 58, tall, composed, wearing the kind of dress uniform that made people straighten before they understood why. A young aide stepped out behind him carrying a dark presentation case with both hands. Along the drive, nearly 300 service members stood in quiet formation: SEALs, corpsmen, sailors, and support personnel from 3 commands. They had not stormed the wedding. They had been staged nearby, cleared through the proper contacts, and brought in with the kind of quiet order that made their presence feel even larger. They were not crowding the wedding or disrupting the music. They were simply standing there like a truth my family could no longer crop out of the picture. Harlan moved first. "This is a private event." Admiral Keene did not embarrass him. He did not need to. "Mr. Mercer, we will be brief. This has been authorized through command, and it concerns Lieutenant Commander Mercer. Lieutenant Commander Mercer. Not Sloane, who helps with the gift table. Not my oldest, who does something administrative. Not sister of the bride." My rank landed on that lawn in front of every person my father had tried to impress. Harlan looked around and saw Bill Carrington watching him without smiling. Susan Carrington's champagne glass had lowered. Claire Alden stood still near the edge of the tent, her face unreadable in the way powerful people become unreadable when they are deciding what they will remember. Admiral Keene turned toward Blythe and Grant. "I apologize for the interruption to your wedding." Before my father could answer for them, Grant stepped forward. "Sir, please continue." Blythe looked at him, then at me, her veil moving in the bay wind. For the first time all day, she looked less like a bride in a perfect picture and more like a sister realizing the frame had been built wrong. Admiral Keene faced the lawn. "Please stand." The 218 wedding guests stood. The woman who had asked me for tonic stood. The man who had asked about bread baskets stood. The people who had watched me hover near the gift table stood. Derek Voss lifted his camera, then lowered it, then lifted it again because there was no angle left where I disappeared. Vivian saw the unit pin back on my blouse. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The aide opened the case. Admiral Keene began to read. The citation named me fully. Lieutenant Commander Sloane Mercer, United States Navy. It spoke of October 2024, of a team pinned down after an ambush, of an evacuation route cut under hostile fire. It said I returned to the danger area to recover 2 wounded personnel. It said I refused evacuation while 1 operator remained behind. It said I maintained communications, protected team integrity, and stayed past the point anyone had a right to ask another human being to stay. Then he said Eli Navarro's name. Lucia made a sound so small I almost missed it. Mateo bowed his head. Marisol covered her mouth and cried without letting her shoulders shake. I did not look at my father then. I looked at them. Because this was never really about humiliating Harlan Mercer. It was about making sure Eli was not hidden at a wedding, because grief did not match the flowers. The citation ended with words I had tried not to imagine. Navy Cross. Admiral Keene took the medal from the case. The real one, the official one. Not the packet hidden in the closet, not the duplicate set I had been afraid to touch. He stepped in front of me, and for one strange second, I remembered my mother's fingers removing the unit pin because the photographs needed to feel timeless. Now that pin was on my blouse, and the Navy Cross was placed beside it. Admiral Keene stepped back and saluted. Nearly 300 service members saluted with him. Alina stood among them. Eyes wet, spine straight. I returned the salute. In that moment, the lawn was utterly silent. My father had told me no one cared about my Navy career, and the only sound left was the wind off Chesapeake Bay, moving through rows of people who had stood up because of it. When the salute ended, I saw the damage settle where it belonged. Vivian stood frozen, unable to smooth anything back into place. Harlan looked from Bill to Claire to the service members to the guests, searching for the room he had controlled all afternoon. It was gone. He had lost it without anyone shouting. Blythe was crying now, not loudly, not dramatically. Her eyes were fixed on me with a horror that had nothing to do with the medal and everything to do with where she had let me stand. Admiral Keene offered me the microphone. My phone was still in my hand. The text was still there. No one cares about your Navy career. Stay out of the pictures and keep those people quiet. I could have read it. One sentence, and Sloane Mercer would have been stripped bare in front of his banker, his county commissioner, his developers, his wife's charity friends, his new son-in-law, and almost 300 witnesses in uniform. For a moment, I wanted to. Then I looked at Lucia Navarro. I looked at Mateo and Marisol. I looked at Rose, at Alina, at Blythe in her wedding dress. I would not use Eli as a weapon against my father. I took the microphone. Thank you, Admiral Keene. Thank you to Command, and to every one of you who came here today. My voice was steadier than I felt. I found Alina in the formation. Chief Okoro, I am grateful you are standing here. Her face broke for half a second. Then she pulled it back together. I turned to the Navarro family. Eli was not just a name in a citation. He was a son, a brother, a man who could make a joke when no one else in the room remembered how to breathe. He was not alone. He was called by his name, and his name will not be hidden behind any hedge. Lucia pressed both hands to her mouth. Then I looked at Blythe. This is still your wedding day. I will not take it from you. I felt my father move behind her as if relief had made him brave, so I added the rest. But I will not disappear from it anymore. I handed the microphone back. The formation began to break with the same quiet order in which it had arrived. Admiral Keene told me the formal ceremony in Norfolk would still take place, with full protocol, and that the Navarro family would be honored guests. That small sentence anchored the whole impossible afternoon back into reality. When the crowd loosened, Blythe came to me. She did not say she had not known. That would have been too easy. I didn't just not know, she whispered. I didn't ask. I let you fix everything. I let them put you behind me, because it was easier for me. I looked at my little sister, at the girl I had protected so long she had mistaken protection for furniture. We'll talk, I said. Really talk. Not in pictures, not through Mom, not with you asking me to understand. She nodded, crying harder now. I hugged her because I still loved her. I did not forgive everything in that hug. I only refused to let our parents decide what came next. Grant stood beside her and did not let Harlan step between us. Rose faced my father near the hedge. You were so afraid she would embarrass you, she said. Now everyone knows what you hid. Later, outside near the drive, Harlan tried to find me. I didn't know it was that serious. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I did not wait for him to become the father I needed. You knew enough to hide the letter. His mouth opened. I thought maybe he would say he was proud. Maybe after 37 years, the word would finally come. It did not, so I left him there. Bill Carrington passed him without stopping to discuss financing, and that silence did more damage than an argument would have. Susan did not come back to kiss my mother's cheek. Claire Alden only said coldly, We'll talk another time, Harlan. Behind me, someone whispered. He hid a Navy Cross letter from his own daughter. For a man like my father, that was the real consequence. Not shouting. Not scandal in the dramatic sense. Just the room deciding, quietly and all at once, that he was no longer the man he had spent the afternoon pretending to be. Derek took one last photograph before the sun dropped. In it, I stood with Rose, Alina, the Navarro family, and Blythe. The hedge was behind us, but it did not hide me anymore. That night, I went back to the sewing room and took the blue box from the closet. It was not a thing I feared opening now. It was only proof that the truth had been real before anyone chose to see it. The official medal rested on my blouse. The citation packet went into my bag. The unit pin stayed where it belonged. The next morning, I drove back toward Norfolk with the blue box on the passenger seat and the bay fading in my rearview mirror. My phone stayed quiet until Rose texted that she would come with me to the formal ceremony. A minute later, Marisol sent one line. Thank you for saying his name. I kept driving. For years, I thought justice would mean my father finally saying he was proud of me. But justice was quieter than that. Justice was leaving the old role behind. Justice was knowing who I was without needing Sloane Mercer to confirm it. And if you had been standing on that lawn with your father's text in your hand, with every person who ever doubted you finally listening, would you have read his words out loud? Or would you have done what I did, told the truth that mattered, kept your dignity and walked away.